Right now, you're hearing sounds made from my latest Ableton Live and sample pack, Glitch Drums. Glitch Drums contains 232 drum samples synthesized with the Moog Slim Fatty analog synthesizer and processed in Ableton Live. There are 21 Ableton Live drum racks you can use, and these sounds are meant to be kind of unique and strange and unusual, not your typical drum machine or acoustic drum samples. There's also a free version of the pack you can download from my site as well, brianfunk.com. And if you decide you want to pick up Glitch Drums, use the code PODCAST when you check out and you will save 25%. So check out Glitch Drums at brianfunk.com. How's it going, everybody, and welcome to the Music Production Podcast. My name is Brian Funk, and I'm your host. I am a musician, producer, Ableton certified, trainer, teacher, yada yada. You can find my work at brianfunk.com. Today, I want to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and machine learning. Now, over the last month or two, I've had some interviews with people that are involved in the artificial intelligence machine learning world. And it's helped clarify a lot of my thoughts about what artificial intelligence is. It might not be exactly the world of the Terminator coming and taking things over, but it does present some interesting challenges for us as musicians on some things that may be changing down the road. And if there's one thing you can count on is that things will change. That's life for you, right? So if you're interested, I encourage you to listen to episode 136 with Hazel Savage, 137 with Paul Zagordon, and 139 with Jonathan Bailey from Isotope. We have some discussions about machine learning and artificial intelligence. And one of the questions I try to address in each one of those episodes is, are we going to lose our jobs? Are we going to be replaced by machines? My overall feeling is no, if you know what to do. And that really means being human, to really emphasize what it is to be a human being. That's the thing that's going to save us in this world when machines are making music, when machines are creating music, and it's available for people to consume. We need to do something that makes us more interesting, and we're going to more than ever have to focus on our humanity. And one of the things that became clear to me is the importance of our story. If you look at music historically, it has affected culture in a lot of ways. It's made social change. It's commented on events that have happened in the world, and it's made people change the way they feel about things. It's even changed how we dress and how we act. Music has that power, and a lot of times that power doesn't come straight from the song alone, but also from the story of the song. I'm sure you've had the experience of maybe you heard a song, didn't think too much of it, but then you hear the story behind how it was made or a little bit about the artist and their inspiration, and that helps you connect to it a bit more. That's the kind of thing I think we're going to have to focus on as musicians, as artists, are our stories. What makes us interesting? What is the human aspect we can connect to? I like to think about, as an example, maybe some artists that have had impact on people. Maybe look at, say, the Beatles. The Beatles had a big story attached to them, especially when they got into some of their more later years where they're embracing like Indian philosophy, when they're experimenting with drugs, when they're just testing the boundaries of what pop music can be. That got pretty interesting, and it did divide people. There's some great video you can watch of people reacting to the first time they ever heard Strawberry Fields Forever. And I think Penny Lane as well. Those songs were such departures from their older material. They had the mustaches, they were dressing weird. People had a hard time accepting that. Other people thought it was amazing. Like, wow, we're really doing something different. This is like our generation speaking. That's the kind of thing we got to focus on. Think about a band like Nirvana. I grew up in the 90s, so this is a big example for me. Nirvana came along, and their music was a statement, of course. It was different. It was loud. It was aggressive. It was raw, had a lot of energy. It wasn't the polished music that was the music of the 80s for the most part. And it affected the entire culture. And then if you look what happened to rock music, at least after that, there's a clear delineation from before Nirvana and after Nirvana. People started wearing ripped jeans and flannels. I don't think you're going to get that from artificially created music. How is an artificially created song, no matter how good it is, how is it going to affect culture in that way where people might change their wardrobe, to identify with a particular movement? That's something that the computer's really going to have a hard time recreating, but us as humans, as artists, can really tap into. I was thinking about one of the biggest pop stars today, Billie Eilish, and what is making her jump out and be so popular and successful in the world. And it's not just with your normal kind of pop mainstream music audience. I'm seeing this same kind of praise coming from people that are deep in the music industry, really appreciating what she is doing. And I think it's because it's her humanity in a lot of ways. She's different. She's not doing what the people before her have always done. She's challenging the norms and expectations. She's not afraid to be different. By definition, machine learning is going to be predictable. It's going to be based off of the information that's been fed in. Now, one of the things that was clarified to me in these conversations, especially with Hazel Savage, for instance, was that machine learning is really just taking lots and lots of data and finding the commonalities and categorizing. It's not really something that's thinking and coming up with original ideas. And that would always mean that whatever is created by the computer is kind of going to be a step behind. It's always going to be catching up on what's going on in the real world. And an artist like Nirvana or Billie Eilish can come out and shake that all up. Billie Eilish is not selling her music on sexuality like so many people are. That's not the point of what she's doing. She's not afraid to be dark. She's got an interesting story in working with her brother, who is the producer. So this like family thing. She's homeschooled. She's broken out at such a young age. She's got a lot of really interesting things working for her that you just won't have with an artificially created song. There's no artist, there's no person behind that. So I think we need to really pay attention to that. What is the story you're trying to communicate? What do you stand for? What are your philosophies and your beliefs? What is your angle at being a person? I think we can also think about like authenticity in this and being real. Like, as I said before, like anything made by the computer is really imitating. It's not creating anything new. It's using the information of the things that came before and making something new out of it that may have never been heard, but it's not going to be groundbreaking, at least at the place we're at right now. It can't really foresee that. It's taking the information of, say, what makes there's actually, as an example, I'll put this in the show notes. There's like this machine created death metal YouTube page. It's like, I think it's streaming 24 hours or something like that. And it's just making death metal music. And it's taking what the conventions of that genre are and just kind of randomly choosing things and spitting it back out. It's figured out what ideas work well together, and it's putting them into these new compositions. But it's always derivative. You might make the argument that music in general is always derivative, and there's probably a lot of truth to that. Everything has been done before, and people are just combining influences to make something new. They're not really coming up with anything original. That is something, maybe a decent argument to what I'm saying here. But I think that humans have the ability to find different things that make an interesting juxtaposition. And what I mean by that is you can take things that come from two seemingly different or opposing cultural places, putting them together might make something new and might make a new statement. It's actually a project I do with my Berkeley Online class. It's a sampling class, and one of the projects is to take 3 different samples that come from different places, but when you put them together, create a new message. And that's, I think, something you need to be responsible with when you sample. Are you appropriating someone, or are you being fair to the original? Are you respecting where it came from? because sometimes putting things together is stepping on the toes of the original message, which may be the point you have. But you can make those sorts of statements by combining different elements. The computer is not going to really be aware of that. It doesn't understand the emotional impact or the cultural impact of the different, in the death metal case, it doesn't understand like what putting these things together creates. It doesn't get the addition of various parts. And sometimes the sum is greater than the individual parts. You put 2 or 3 things together, it makes something much bigger. It's not just random elements stuck together. So some kind of authenticity and that interesting juxtaposition, as I said, are things that are going to make it interesting and important. I think the personal connection is an important one. I had an experience recently, and I thought of it because I was watching an episode of the show The Office, and one of the characters, his name's Robert California, and this is in the years after Steve Carell left the show as Michael Scott, but Robert California was kind of taking over the role, and he was trying to hype up The Office, which is a paper company, and that's like kind of the whole thing of the show. It's a dying industry. But his point was that like the big box stores can't offer the personal connection. So he said when he wants to buy something, he goes online and buys it. When he needs information about something, he goes to the store. And this is what I found myself doing. I had a broken cymbal stand, and I wasn't really sure if I needed to buy a whole new cymbal stand or if I could just replace the part that was broken. And I really had no idea how to type this into Google, how to search on Amazon for what I was looking for. What I needed to do was show it to somebody and ask them a question. That's why I went to Guitar Center. Normally, I'd probably just order it online. It would have been easier for me. Now, my failing there was when I got to Guitar Center, the person that was helping me seemed very disinterested. He was I overheard him say something about his break to one of his coworkers, and just really wasn't very helpful for me. It wasn't what I needed. He was ready to ring me up, and that's about it. Luckily, the other person helped me and showed me what some of my choices were, and I was able to walk out of there with just the part I needed that I could add to the cymbal stand parts I already had. And that was a big help, and I couldn't have figured that out alone. But I think the danger for some place like Guitar Center is not offering that personal connection, because I got kind of frustrated standing there trying to get this help that I wasn't getting. It was like I came all the way here to this store looking for that personal advice and connection, and I wasn't getting it. And it's like, I might as well be on the internet Googling this. Luckily, someone else was a much better employee and helped me out, and I left very satisfied and saved a lot of money as well. Personal connection is what we're longing for, I think. And as our world gets a little more, strangely, as we get more connected, we get a little bit more disconnected. We have fewer personal connections. I think they become more important. I think that this is something we can really emphasize. I spent a weekend in Portland with one of my good friends, about almost a month ago now, and we had nothing to do there. There was no reason to be in Portland, Oregon for us. We just had a trip we could take, so we took it. And we really enjoyed the kind of lack of connection that we had, where we were able to go places because we weren't pressed for time and just talk to people or just sit down and talk with each other. It was really nice not to have to rush out to the next thing. Most of the time, I'm rushing from one activity to the next. I'm recording a podcast. I'm going to run upstairs and do something and go out and do errands. And, everything seems to be like kind of really crammed into the schedule. I think a lot of people are living this way. And it's one of these types of things that we long for, is maybe that connection, that time not to be so inundated with something and to experience things instead of worrying about what we're doing next, to be in the moment a little bit. And that's something I think we can offer through our music and the experience of having someone listen to your music and connecting with your story. This is, in my opinion, something I think people are going to really start longing for more and more. And I think we are seeing it, where there's a kind of a big movement in things like mindfulness and being in the moment and meditation. I think our all sort of rebellions against our constant flood of information that's always coming in all the time. Another thing I think we can think about with artificial intelligence and how to make ourselves stand out is that we're humans. We can do things that are unexpected. We can take a random turn, try something completely irrational. Computers aren't going to do that because they're trying to follow the rules of what makes something happen. I remember a commercial, probably from the early 2000s, it was some video game system that was offering online play. You could play with other gamers on the internet, when that was new and exciting. And they were playing some game, and like whoever was playing the game was running around with his gun or whatever. And there was a guy in a clown car just circling him, just being weird and annoying. And the point of the commercial was like, it then cut to the other person. It was actually a clown sitting there playing the game. The point was, when you play against a human, you never know what you're going to get. When you play a game against the computer, you kind of know what you're going to get. One of my favorite games of all time is Street Fighter 2. I dumped so many coins into that machine as a kid, and then when it came out on the Super Nintendo and whatever, I bought all the versions of it. Spent a lot of money on Street Fighter 2. And it's a two-player game, but you can play the computer. The computer is kind of predictable after a while. You kind of know the types of things they're going to do. And because of that, you get good at playing the computer. And I definitely did that, playing the game so much. But then sometimes you play the game against a human, and then it's totally different. And it kind of struck me playing someone that never played the game before, and they beat me. And I'm like, how is this possible? You never even played the game. You just beat me. You're just smashing the buttons and jumping and not doing anything calculated, but still defeated me. And it was that kind of like unknown thing, that random input that a human being can give that the computer just won't do. The computer, I don't know how they program your opponent in these types of games on computers, but they are not random because they're doing sensible things. They're not just, it's not like someone randomly pressing the buttons and anything can happen. The computer is like an intelligent fighter. But playing against a human, you never know what they're going to do. They can just mess around. And that's the fun of it. That's where it gets exciting. And that's what we can offer people with music. Surprise them. Do something unexpected. Do something experimental that maybe you aren't supposed to do. So many of the things that I've enjoyed about music is when things go wrong and then I decided to go with it and just see where it takes me. Now, by definition, the computer really isn't going to be that experimental. It's not going to take too many risks unless those risks are programmed into it by a human. It's going to ultimately follow its code, which is its law and its rules. And I think we all know what happens to music when you only follow the rules. It will sound good, put good in quotation marks. It's maybe there's no wrong notes. Everything's on pitch and in time. But sometimes when those rules are broken are when the magic happens in music, when the singer's voice cracks a little bit, or maybe the band speeds up just a little bit before the chorus because they're getting excited. All of these things bring this human element, and it helps evoke those emotional responses you're trying to get out of your music. The unexpected, surprise them, make it seems like it's going to go in one direction and it suddenly takes a turn. Try something that you shouldn't do. Again, let's think of the Beatles and listen to A Day in the Life when they have the orchestra come in. The instructions for the orchestra during the part that kind of links the two songs together that John Lennon sings and Paul McCartney sings. The instructions for the orchestra, I think they had some number of bars, might have been 16 bars. And their instructions were to start on their lowest note, and by the end of it, end up on their highest note. Where you are in the middle, that's up to you. So that's how they get this like rising crescendo of noise, and it's very tense, and it's very almost scary sounding when everything's building up, building up, building up, but then it all ends on that same note and it's in that Paul McCartney part of the song. I don't think you can have a computer decide to do that. Those are the kinds of things you need to think about to make music interesting. We can also connect with our audience. And this is what, we've seen how effective this can be through social media, how artists have really launched careers off of their social media, off of their Instagrams and Facebooks and MySpaces and all that stuff to connect with their audience, to share their thoughts, their feelings, their problems, interact with them, see what their fans are doing, have an Ask Me Anything on Reddit and just talk to your fans. If a computer makes a beautiful track that the world loves, we'll never be able to talk to the computer. We'll never be able to hear the story. We'll never be able to understand what problems the computer ran into while it was writing the song. We're not going to get those interesting, quirky things that makes us connect to music and connect with the artist. So connecting with the audience is going to be especially important. And that has already become a thing. I think it's going to be even more. I think people want that connection. I know I do. I love that. That's made me a fan of music. As I've been into music my whole life, I always wind up opening up those CD booklets or those record albums, and then maybe reading an interview, and then just learning, reading biographies. It makes it such a much more interactive experience, and it helps you understand where they're coming from, and you realize how connected we all are and what we all have in common. That's going to be especially important, that humanity there. In kind of regard to like some of the conversations I had with Jonathan Bailey, with Paul Gordon, and Hazel Savage, I think they've all kind of said like that, what they're doing with artificial intelligence isn't going to take over the industry, but there's still some things it may take out of the picture. So if we're relying on things that machines can do better, then we're in danger. We need to be afraid. Jonathan Bailey talks about this. It was kind of nice and refreshing just to hear him say, when I asked him, should we be afraid? And he's kind of like, yeah, maybe. Isotope is doing a lot of really cool stuff, cool in my opinion, with their plugins, where they're interacting with each other, where there's plugin assistance, mixing assistance, mastering assistance, where you can actually click a button and these plugins will listen to your music and make educated guesses, basically, based on what it's hearing and the genre you tell it and what you're going for. And I'll be honest, like it's a pretty good starting place. I've done it with Ozone quite a bit. And Neutron as well, where you kind of let it know what instrument you have. And I think Neutron even can figure out what kind of instrument you have, which is pretty cool. And it will make like a decent guess at like how to mix it. And that's based on so much information that has been fed into it. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the plugins are still learning too as you use them. I believe, I might have to double check on that, but I believe they are taking that information and using it to increase its database and to increase the, the knowledge, quote unquote, of the plugin. Now, if you're gonna do like, say, a mastering job that's kind of just cookie cutter normal thing, or a mix that's just kind of very predictable, then yeah, maybe Isotope's plugins might threaten you a little bit. You might lose some business off of that because people can do it at home with a click of a button. And can you blame them really? I don't think so. What you would need to do in these cases is bring something to the table that the computer can't, something that maybe makes your mixes a little more edgy or interesting or push the envelope somehow. I personally like these features, and I do use them because it kind of takes some of the tedious work out of what I'm doing. When I think of like what I enjoy about making music, it's more the creation process. It's more the writing the songs and seeing how things work together and come together. I do enjoy mixing, but there's a point where it gets kind of tedious, where you're just like, trying to check things and you're mix isn't quite right in the car and it sounds great on your monitors and headphones are a little off. Some of that gets a little frustrating. And I'm not afraid to tell you that I don't enjoy that as much as the other parts. So having something that sort of like helps me get there a little bit faster, I enjoy. I think that's great. Um, but that means as things get more intelligent and they start realizing like some technical aspects, then we have to, if we want to keep our jobs, we have to think of things that we can offer that the machine's not going to be able to offer. To talk about Mubert, which is from the interview with Paul Gordon. Mubert makes computer generated music with user samples. So it uses samples and kind of generates music based off of that. And if you're familiar with Ableton Live, Paul said it's not that dissimilar from follow actions. So in Ableton Live, there's a feature called follow actions where you have your musical clips. So, say I have a drum track, I might have like four different beats. I can tell when I play one of those beats, I can tell live to switch to, say, the next beat after 4 bars. Or I can say after 4 bars, switch to any beat, switch to any other beat. So this way, you can create these sort of like randomly generated patterns based on what you tell the computer to do, or not even random. It could be very purposeful. But basically, to simplify this, Mubert is kind of doing that with tons of samples and creating types of music that you kind of ask it to create. And they're marketing towards businesses. So that might be like the local spa that needs music while you get a massage, or it might be a video game that needs some background music. Now, my initial thought of that was like, oh my God, that's going to take so many musicians' jobs. This is really bad. Oh no, right? But I think, again, like we can find a way to embrace this technology. One of the things Paul talked about was how you can take your own samples, so say the stems of your songs or little loops you've made, or unfinished ideas, I think are especially interesting. Put it into Mubert and have this program create randomly generated music using your sounds. It could be an interesting way to maybe promote an album or a song. Be like, okay, here's like this random version. It's always different every time you play it. And then maybe they'll want to check out your real version. Um, but I think also like this is going to appeal for people and companies where the focus on the music isn't super important. Now, that's probably a lot of places that don't really care about the music. They want it to sound good and fit a certain mood or genre, and then they might go for that. And that's totally cool. And if you're on the other end, if you're a business, this can be a really cost-effective thing to do to get your business off the ground. But there are also businesses and companies that are going to want the individual. They're going to want the humanity. And those are maybe the ones to start seeking out. Maybe it's the local place that wants to have local music. Get involved with that. That's going to need to be what it is. And the nice thing about that is you're kind of now with your audience compared to like if you're having your music playing somewhere where no one really cares that's playing anyway. So kind of puts you in places where maybe people are more inclined to check out new music. So we can use that, and just to finish off with say Museo, which is the company that Hazel Savage has, and their job is basically to classify music. So it listens to music and helps define its mood, its genre, and all these different aspects of the song are analyzed to figure out what it is so it can be categorized. And this can help say people that are looking for, say I am a video game producer, I make apps or something, I can use a service to a sound library or something, and Museo kind of helps you search through it. It kind of categorizes everything, makes things more findable. Because otherwise, you just might have to sift through everything. So companies that use sound and music libraries might want Museo to help make their music more findable. I think this is interesting as a songwriter because you might determine what kind of music people are looking for. And interestingly, Hazel said that they want more happy music. They need more cheerful music. And that kind of makes a lot of sense if you think about it. If you're a company and you're trying to sell a product, you probably want happy music. So it might help you decide if you want to produce music for sound and music libraries. It might help you determine what kind of stuff needs to be made and um, what companies are looking for as well. So should we be afraid of this? I would say maybe. If you are relying on things that machines can do, then yeah, maybe heads up. A machine is going to be able to do it better one day. But I don't think you need to be afraid if you're adding some humanity to your music or your service. Um, Something that maybe has an interesting story or does some unexpected or experimental things. I think you're safe because the computer can't foresee what's going to happen next. It can only react based on the information it's already received. They're not at the point where they're thinking and having feelings yet. They're really just very good at sifting through data. That's probably the biggest takeaway I've come from these episodes of the podcast is that that's really what they're doing. They're collecting data and they're sorting it and rearranging it and making things with it. So we need to maybe be on our toes a little more and maybe rather than threaten our jobs and threaten music as a whole, maybe it'll make music take the next step because people will be more apt to take chances and take risks and do things that are out of the conventions of a genre, for instance, and try new things and do something a machine would never do. Just like somebody mashing on the buttons on Street Fighter 2 and winning a bout because they're doing something the machine would never do, people may make music in ways that a machine may never think to and uncover some new and exciting things. So don't be afraid, just be more human. So that's it. Thanks very much for listening. And again, if you are enjoying this show, please give it a comment or a rating on your podcast provider, whether that's iTunes or Spotify. I think iTunes is going away, right? So it would just be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you're listening. I do appreciate that. I love the feedback. So you can also send me a message on any of the social media. You can usually find me Brian Funk or Brian Funk Music, brianfunk.com. Let me know. This is why I enjoy the podcast. Actually, is the personal connection, the humanity, and the authenticity from people. And I have found actually that some of the episodes that I do that get the biggest response are often the ones that I almost don't publish because I think they're maybe too personal. For example, the last episode I did, which I think was 140. I talked about Thanksgiving and being thankful and how gratitude can make better music and help you live a better life, I think is the title. And I sort of felt like maybe this isn't connected to music production enough. I'm making the connection, but maybe I should be talking more about like how to program your compressor. So there was a part of me that almost didn't do that podcast. However, I did it. And I got a lot of feedback. It was a lot of nice stuff. Even just people saying, "Hey, man, happy Thanksgiving! Thanks for doing the show," or just anything. There were people that shared personal stories. It was pretty cool. And the fun part is, like, I almost didn't do that because I thought it was too human, too personal. And more, I'm finding, and as I kind of analyze maybe the people that I tend to follow on the internet and pay attention to myself, it's that personal connection now that's really keeping me coming back. And it makes, for example, when I meet some of these people in real life, it's like, I kind of know you, I feel this like relationship that I don't even have yet. So, um, being personal, being authentic, being real, doing the unexpected, experimenting, connecting with your audience, not being afraid to be different, authenticity, personal connection, all that stuff, your story as an artist, as a musician, as a producer, as a mixer, a master engineer, any of that stuff, I think is where we have to focus our energy. And I think it might not connect with everybody all the time, but the people that it does connect with, it's going to be much deeper. And that's what I think we want. So thank you for listening. Don't fear the machines too much yet. I don't think we have anything to worry about just yet. Take care.